I didn't get louder, I got dangerous. This is what silence looks like. They thought I disappeared. I stopped explaining, everything changed. Watch what happens when I say nothing. When the world thought I was weak, they thought I was quiet because I had nothing to say. They were wrong. I was quiet because I was listening to every insult disguised as advice, every smile that carried disrespect, every door closed gently as if politeness could hide rejection. They looked at me and saw nothing worth fearing. Nothing worth noticing, nothing worth remembering. I was the shadow in the room, the name spoken last, if spoken at all. The presence they forgot the moment I turned away, and I let them, because in a world addicted to noise, silence is invisible, and invisibility keeps you alive. They spoke loudly, they laughed loudly, they judged loudly, they celebrated loudly. And I listened quietly. They mistook my silence for surrender. They thought the absence of my voice meant the absence of my spine. They thought because I didn't argue, I agreed. Because I didn't fight back, I accepted my place beneath them. They were wrong, dangerously wrong. I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was silent because I was learning. I learned how people reveal their true nature when they think you don't matter. I learned how cruelty hides behind jokes, how betrayal wears the mask of loyalty until the moment it stabs you in the back. I learned that respect is rarely given. It is taken, or it is never offered at all. They talked over me, they decided for me. They reduced me to a background character in my own story, and every time it happened, something inside me tightened, not shattered, not collapsed, compressed, pressure building in a place no one could see. I remember the looks, the sideways glances, the subtle smirks that said, "You're not one of us," the tone that said, "Stay in your place." They didn't hate me enough to fight me. They didn't respect me enough to fear me. They dismissed me. And dismissal cuts deeper than open hostility. Because hatred admits your existence, dismissal erases it. I felt that erasure every day. In rooms where my ideas were ignored until someone louder repeated them. In moments where my effort was expected but my name was forgotten. In relationships where my loyalty was used but never valued, they took and took and took, and I gave, because I believed being patient meant being noble. I believed silence meant maturity. I believed endurance would be rewarded. I was wrong. Patience without boundaries is permission. Silence without purpose is exploitation, and they exploited me. They pushed because I didn't push back. They crossed lines because I didn't draw them thick enough. They tested limits because they thought I had none. I watched them grow comfortable in their disrespect, comfortable using me, comfortable underestimating me, comfortable thinking I would always be there, quiet. Obedient, predictable. They thought I was safe to step on, safe to ignore, safe to discard. They never once asked how much I could carry. They never wondered how much weight a silent soul could hold. Because silence doesn't look like strength, it looks like absence. But strength doesn't announce itself, it accumulates. Every insult I swallowed added weight. Every betrayal I forgave added pressure. Every night I questioned my worth added fire, and still I said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was choosing my moment. I watched how quickly loyalty vanished when it was inconvenient, how easily principles bent when power was involved. How loudly people preached values they never lived by. I saw the truth most people are too busy talking to notice. The world is not kind to the quiet, it feeds on them, and I was being fed on. There were moments, many, where I almost broke. Moments when I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to prove them wrong with words sharp enough to cut. But words would have only fed them, given them what they wanted: reaction, validation, control. So I swallowed the scream, and in that swallowing something changed. My silence stopped being fear. It became discipline. I stopped explaining myself. Because explanation assumes the other person deserves clarity. Most of them didn't. I stopped chasing approval. Because approval from people who don't respect you is poison. It numbs you while it kills you. I stopped asking to be seen. Because power doesn't beg for recognition. They still thought I was weak, still thought I was harmless, still thought my quiet meant compliance. They mistook my calm for acceptance, my restraint for submission, my patience for surrender. They never saw the calculation behind my eyes, the inventory of wrongs, the memory of every slight. I remembered everything, every laugh at my expense, every promise broken, every time I was told to wait while others were chosen. And I didn't forget, because silence has an echo. It repeats things in your head until they carve themselves into resolve. I wasn't shrinking, I was condensing, becoming denser, heavier, more dangerous. They built a version of me in their minds, small, manageable, insignificant, and I let them believe in that illusion. Because when people think you're weak, they show you everything: their arrogance, their greed, their fear. And fear is information. I gathered it all, quietly. They never noticed the shift. The moment my silence stopped being defensive and became intentional. The moment I stopped surviving and started preparing. I wasn't healing yet. I wasn't strong yet, but I was awake. And awakening is violent. It tears illusions apart. It burns away innocence. I saw the world for what it was: not fair, not kind, not forgiving, but honest in its cruelty. And for the first time, I stopped asking why it hurt me. I stopped asking why I wasn't chosen, why I wasn't heard. Those questions belonged to a weaker version of me. The version they thought I still was. That version died quietly. And in its place, something colder began to breathe, something patient, something watchful, something that understood one brutal truth: in a world that mistakes silence for weakness, silence is the perfect disguise. They thought they had already won, thought I was already defeated. They were wrong. This was not the end of my voice. This was the beginning of my control. The noise of betrayal. There was a time I believed loyalty was real, that friendships were anchors, that allies stood beside you when the ground cracked. I was naive. They didn't leave all at once. That would have been honest. They faded, one by one, like lights turning off in rooms I was still standing in. Friends who once knew my name suddenly forgot it. Allies who swore they had my back quietly chose safer sides. Smiles thinned, replies slowed. Promises became jokes told in the past tense. I felt it before I understood it. The shift. The way conversations ended faster. The way eyes stopped meeting mine. The way my presence became inconvenient. They didn't confront me. They didn't warn me. They didn't even have the courage to say goodbye. They just disappeared. And behind that disappearance came the noise. Whispers first. Soft, careful, just loud enough to poison the room, but quiet enough to deny responsibility. Then laughter, not to my face, never to my face. Laughter behind closed doors. Laughter when they thought I couldn't hear. Laughter that said he doesn't belong here anymore. Mockery dressed as humor. Criticism disguised as concern. Betrayal wrapped in politeness. They smiled at me in public. They buried me in private. And I stood there, surrounded by sound, drowning in it while saying nothing. Silence became my prison, not because I chose it, because every time I tried to speak, the walls moved closer. I spoke once. They ignored me. I spoke twice. They laughed. I spoke again. They twisted my words until they no longer sounded like mine, so I stopped. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I realized something terrifying. Words mean nothing when respect is gone. I watched how easily they rewrote the story, how quickly I became the problem, the burden, the one it was acceptable to betray. They justified it to themselves. They always do. They said I was difficult, too quiet, too intense, not enough. They said it was nothing personal. That lie people tell when it's entirely personal. I wasn't angry at first. I was confused. I replayed conversations in my head, searched for mistakes, wondered what I could have done differently. That was the most humiliating part, not the betrayal itself, but how long I blamed myself for it. I bent, I adjusted, I shrank. I tried to be easier to keep, less threatening, less real, and they still left. That's when the bitterness began to rise, slow, thick, unavoidable. Because I realized something ugly. They didn't abandon me because I was wrong. They abandoned me because I was no longer useful. Loyalty, I learned, is a luxury people offer only when it costs them nothing. The moment standing beside you requires courage, most people disappear. And I watched them disappear with perfect timing. Right when I needed them. Right when I was vulnerable. Right when their absence would hurt the most. That wasn't coincidence. That was choice. They chose comfort over character. Safety over integrity. Belonging over truth. And they chose it loudly. Through jokes I wasn't meant to hear. Through rumors I wasn't meant to trace back to them. Through silence that spoke clearer than any insult. I stood there absorbing it all, every whisper, every glance, every betrayal that pretended to be accidental. And something inside me hardened. I stopped asking why they changed. Because people don't change under pressure. They reveal. I saw who they really were when loyalty became inconvenient. When standing with me meant standing alone. When silence was easier than defense. They weren't enemies. Enemies fight you to your face. They were worse. They were cowards. Cowards who needed me small so they could feel tall. Cowards who needed my silence so they wouldn't have to explain themselves. They expected me to protest, to defend myself, to beg for clarity. They wanted a reaction because reaction would mean I still cared. And I did at first, but caring without power is a liability. Every word I spoke cost me something. Energy, dignity, leverage, and I was running out of currency. That's when the realization hit. Words are currency, and I was broke. I had spent too many words explaining myself to people who never intended to understand. Too many sentences justifying my worth to people who had already decided it was negotiable. Too many conversations trying to repair bridges that were burned on purpose. I was bankrupt from speaking. They could afford to laugh, to mock, to whisper, because they weren't risking anything. I was. Every time I opened my mouth, I gave them more than they deserved, so I stopped. And in that silence, the noise got louder. They talked more when I spoke less, speculated, assumed. invented versions of me that fit their narrative, and I let them, because every word they spoke revealed their weakness. They needed me to react to feel justified. They needed me to break to feel right. They needed my pain to confirm their decision. And I gave them nothing, no defense, no explanation, no emotional refund, just absence. That's when the balance shifted. They grew uncomfortable with my quiet, because silence doesn't argue, it watches, and being watched is terrifying when you're guilty. I began to see it in their behavior, the forced confidence, the overcompensation, the way they checked to see if I was listening. I was, always. My bitterness sharpened into clarity. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about hierarchy. They wanted me beneath them, quiet, compliant, grateful for scraps of inclusion. And the moment I stopped playing that role, they turned. That's when I understood. Silence wasn't submission, it was refusal. Refusal to entertain disrespect. Refusal to argue with people committed to misunderstanding me. Refusal to explain my value to those who profited from denying it. They thought silence meant defeat, but silence was me pulling my resources back, my energy, my attention, my presence. I stopped spending them on people who saw me as expendable, and that decision changed everything. The noise of betrayal didn't disappear, it lost its power, because I no longer needed their approval to validate my existence. They spoke, they laughed, they whispered, and I listened, not as a victim, as a witness. Every betrayal carved something into me, not pain, precision. I learned who not to trust, who folds under pressure, who smiles while holding the knife. And that knowledge is expensive. They paid for it with my silence. They thought they had taken something from me. They did. They took my innocence, and in return they created something far more dangerous. Someone who no longer confuses noise with truth. Someone who understands that words are weapons and restraint is strategy. They made me quiet, and in doing so they taught me how powerful quiet can be. Let them laugh, let them whisper, let them believe they won, because this silence is not surrender. It's accumulation. And when I speak again, it won't be to explain. It will be to end the conversation. Screaming into the void, there was a moment when silence wasn't strength yet. It was suffocation. Before I learned to hold my tongue, I tried to use it. I tried everything. I explained myself in careful sentences, soft sentences, polite sentences. I chose my words like they were fragile glass, hoping if I handled them gently enough, they wouldn't break me. I thought clarity would save me. I thought honesty would protect me. I thought if I could just make them understand, the pain would stop. So I spoke. I spoke with logic. I spoke with emotion. I spoke with restraint. I spoke with desperation. And every time my mouth opened, something inside me emptied. I explained why I acted the way I did, why I felt the way I felt, why I didn't fit the mold they kept forcing me into. I tried to prove I wasn't the villain in their story, that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't difficult, that I wasn't disposable. I begged without using the word beg. Because pride makes begging wear better clothes, I justified my existence as if it required permission. And they listened just long enough to get bored. I bled words. They wanted entertainment. They didn't want truth. Truth is heavy. Truth asks something of you. They wanted drama. They wanted reaction. They wanted something to laugh about when I left the room. So they nodded, pretended to care, pretended to hear. And then they did nothing. No change, no understanding, no accountability, just indifference. Cold, quiet, absolute, the kind of indifference that makes you doubt your own voice. The kind that makes you wonder if you're speaking a language no one else understands. I repeated myself again and again, thinking maybe I hadn't said it right. Maybe I used the wrong tone, the wrong timing, the wrong words. I thought if I just adjusted enough, they'd finally see me. So I adjusted. I became calmer, kinder. Smaller, I swallowed anger mid-sentence. Laughed when something hurt, apologized for feelings I didn't choose. I tried to meet them where they were, but every step toward them was a step away from myself, and still nothing. My words fell into empty air, no echo, no resistance, just silence that didn't listen back. That's when exhaustion set in, not the kind that sleep fixes, the kind that settles into your bones. The exhaustion of being misunderstood for so long you start questioning whether understanding is even possible. I was tired of explaining my intentions, tired of defending my character, tired of proving my worth to people who benefited from denying it. I was tired of screaming into a void that never answered, because that's what it felt like, a scream without sound. A message without receiver. The louder I tried to be, the less they heard. And the quieter they became, the more frantic I felt. That imbalance nearly broke me. There were nights I replayed conversations like crime scenes, examining every word, every pause, every reaction, looking for the moment it all went wrong. But there was no moment. There was only indifference stretched over time. And indifference is the cruelest form of rejection, because it tells you your pain isn't even worth arguing with. At least hatred acknowledges you exist. Indifference erases you. I felt myself disappearing, not physically, emotionally. I started doubting thoughts I once trusted, feelings I once honored, instincts that had always protected me. I asked myself questions no one should have to ask. Am I too much? Am I not enough? Am I the problem? Those questions became a loop, a quiet torture, and the worst part, they didn't even notice. The world kept moving, laughing, talking, while I stood there empty, screaming silently, unheard. That's when I understood something devastating. They weren't confused. They just didn't care. Care requires effort. Care requires discomfort. Care requires accountability. And most people would rather misunderstand you than confront themselves. So my words became weightless. No matter how honest, no matter how raw, no matter how precise, they floated away the moment they left my mouth. I was speaking to preserve relationships that were already dead. I was fighting for space in rooms that had already decided I didn't belong. And the more I fought, the smaller I became. Because desperation strips dignity, and I was bleeding dignity with every explanation. I reached a breaking point, not explosive, not dramatic, just empty. A quiet moment where I realized I had nothing left to give. No more words, no more justifications, no more emotional performances for an audience that wasn't listening. I was tired of translating myself into something palatable, tired of packaging pain into polite language, tired of turning my soul into a presentation. That's when the turning point arrived. Not with a scream, with a withdrawal. Silence stopped feeling like punishment. It started feeling like shelter. For the first time, not speaking didn't hurt more than speaking. For the first time, holding my truth inside felt safer than exposing it. I realized something crucial. Truth is dangerous in the wrong hands, and I had been handing mine to people who used it as entertainment. They didn't protect it, they didn't respect it, they consumed it. So I closed my mouth, not out of fear, out of self-respect. I stopped explaining my intentions to people committed to misunderstanding them. I stopped proving myself to those who benefited from doubting me. I stopped begging for empathy from people who enjoyed my confusion. My silence wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was deliberate, and the moment I stopped speaking, something unexpected happened. The noise didn't stop, but my bleeding did. I felt my energy return, slowly, cautiously. I stopped hemorrhaging myself for approval. I began to understand that not everyone deserves access to your truth. Some people don't want honesty, they want leverage, and I had given them too much. Silence became my boundary, my filter, my protection. I stopped screaming into the void because I finally accepted the truth. The void was never going to answer, and wasting your voice on indifference is the fastest way to lose it. So I chose quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because I was done bleeding for people who came to watch, not to help. Let them call it withdrawal. Let them call it cold. Let them call it weakness. They always mislabel what they don't understand. What they never realized is that the moment I stopped speaking, I started listening. And the moment I stopped explaining, I began transforming. Because silence isn't empty. It's where power goes to grow. And this time, I wasn't screaming. I was preparing. The day I stopped explaining myself, there was a day, not loud, not dramatic, when everything became clear. No thunder, no applause, no warning, just a moment where something inside me clicked into place. I remember the feeling, not anger, not sadness, clarity. A cold, steady understanding that arrived without permission. I was tired, not of people, not of pain. I was tired of explaining myself to those who had already decided who I was. That was the moment. The moment I realized explanation is a form of surrender when given to the wrong ears. I saw it all at once. Every argument that went nowhere, every justification that made me look smaller, every apology I offered just to keep the peace. Peace that never came. I saw how every explanation handed them power, how every clarification invited debate, how every attempt to be understood became another opportunity for them to twist me. I understood the pattern. The more I explained, the less they respected me. The more I defended myself, the guiltier I appeared. The more I reacted, the more control I lost. And in that moment of clarity, I stopped, mid-thought, mid-urge, mid-instinct. I chose restraint over reaction, not because I was afraid to speak, but because I finally understood the cost. Reaction feeds chaos. Reaction feeds manipulators. Reaction keeps you dancing to someone else's rhythm. And I was done dancing. I didn't announce it. Didn't warn anyone. Didn't make a speech about growth or boundaries. I simply withdrew my voice, and something incredible happened. The noise lost its grip on me. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to correct them. Didn't feel the urge to defend my intentions. Didn't feel responsible for their misunderstandings. I let them be wrong. And that was power, because nothing terrifies people more than someone who doesn't need to be believed. I stopped explaining my silence. Stopped explaining my distance. Stopped explaining my choices. I didn't owe them clarity. They had already proven they would misuse it. That was the day silence stopped being pain. It became armor, thick, heavy, unpenetrable. Every word I didn't say became protection. Every reaction I withheld became leverage. I watched how uncomfortable they grew when I didn't respond. How desperate they became for a reaction. How confused they were when I didn't play my part. They wanted the old version of me back. The one who explained, the one who tried, the one who cared enough to argue. But that version was gone. No more explaining, no more pleading, no more noise. Those words became law inside me. I repeated them until they replaced instinct. No more explaining why I feel the way I feel. No more pleading to be understood. No more noise for people who thrive on distortion. I stopped justifying my growth to those threatened by it. Stopped translating my boundaries into language they could digest. Stopped apologizing for not being who they expected. I didn't become cruel. I became controlled. There is a difference. Cruelty lashes out. Control observes. I chose control. And with control came calm. Not peace yet, but calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you are no longer exposed. I realized silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you're choosing when to speak. And timing is everything. I didn't need to win arguments anymore. I needed to win myself back. Every explanation I refused to give strengthened my spine. Every argument I walked away from sharpened my focus. I felt my power returning, slowly, quietly, like blood flowing back into a limb that had gone numb. I stopped chasing validation, stopped auditioning for acceptance, stopped negotiating my worth. I let them think what they wanted, because people who misunderstand you on purpose don't deserve correction. They deserve distance. That was another realization. Distance is not avoidance. It's selection. I was selecting myself. The emotional shift was undeniable. Pain began to lose its edge, not because it vanished, but because it no longer controlled me. Pain wants reaction, control wants discipline, and discipline was growing in me. I stopped reacting to disrespect, stopped reacting to rumors, stopped reacting to provocation, not because I didn't notice, because I did. I noticed everything. But I also noticed how powerful it felt to remain unmoved. To let insults fall flat, to let assumptions rot without correction, to let people expose themselves without interruption. Silence gave me that power. Armor doesn't attack, it absorbs, and I had become armored. I wasn't hiding, I was fortified. They tried to pull me back into old patterns, provoked me, questioned me, accused me of changing. They were right, I had changed. I had stopped needing their approval to exist. That frightened them. Because people are comfortable with the version of you they can control. And I was no longer controllable. I didn't announce my strength. I embodied it. I didn't threaten. I withdrew. I didn't argue. I observed. And in that observation, I learned more than I ever did while speaking. I learned who needed noise to feel powerful, who collapsed without attention, who only felt important when they could pull reactions out of others. I learned that silence starves manipulators. It denies them fuel. And starving something that feeds on you, that's dominance. The emotional chaos inside me began to organize itself. Thoughts sharpened, focus narrowed, purpose formed. I was no longer leaking energy through my mouth. I was conserving it. Every unspoken word became stored strength. This wasn't suppression, it was strategy. I wasn't bottling emotions. I was refining them, turning rage into patience, turning pain into precision, turning chaos into clarity. That day marked the end of my need to be understood, and the beginning of my decision to be unstoppable. I stopped explaining myself, and in doing so, I took my power back. Let them guess, let them assume, let them misunderstand. I no longer needed their agreement to move forward. Silence had become my shield, my discipline, my command. No more explaining, no more pleading, no more noise, only intention, only control, only strength. That was the day I stopped bleeding words and started building power. Silence is not empty. It is loaded. Silence is not what they think it is. They think it's absence. They think it's hesitation. They think it's weakness hiding in the dark. They are wrong. Silence is not empty. It is loaded, loaded with restraint, loaded with intention, loaded with consequences. I learned that the moment I stopped wasting my voice, when I stopped reacting, something shifted in the air around me. The space grew heavier, the tension thicker, because noise reassures people. Noise tells them where you stand. Noise gives them something to measure. Silence gives them nothing, and nothing terrifies more than the unknown. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're planning. They don't know where the line is anymore, so they imagine. And imagination is far more brutal than truth. The unseen is more terrifying than the obvious. A shouted threat can be prepared for. A visible enemy can be tracked. A loud opponent can be anticipated. But silence makes people uneasy. It makes them restless. It forces them to confront their own thoughts, and most people can't survive that. I saw it in their eyes, the way they leaned in when I stopped speaking, the way they filled the quiet with nervous words, the way they exposed themselves trying to regain control. Silence became pressure, not outward, inward. They felt it pushing on their chest, their certainty cracking, their confidence leaking. Because when you don't explain yourself, they start explaining themselves. And in those explanations, they reveal everything. Their fear, their guilt, their intentions. I didn't need to accuse them. I didn't need to confront them. I let the silence do the work. They thought silence meant passivity, but silence is an active force. It watches, it waits, it sharpens. A gun doesn't scream before it fires. It doesn't warn, it doesn't argue, it doesn't negotiate. It simply waits for the moment. And when it speaks, it's final. That metaphor settled into my bones. I realized that every word I withheld was a round in the chamber, not fired recklessly, not wasted on noise, saved, measured, intentional. My voice didn't disappear. It went underground. And underground is where pressure builds. I stopped feeling the need to announce my thoughts, stopped feeling the urge to defend my position. Because people who matter don't need explanations, and people who don't won't respect them anyway. Silence became my filter. Those who stayed calm around it were worth keeping. Those who panicked exposed themselves. That's when the confidence arrived. Not loud, not arrogant, cold, chilling, the kind of confidence that doesn't need witnesses. I walked differently, not physically. Internally, I no longer rushed to fill gaps, didn't chase comfort, didn't fear pauses. I let conversations hang unfinished, let questions go unanswered, let tension breathe. And every time I did, I felt stronger, because control lives in restraint. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. They're often the most insecure. Power doesn't need to announce itself. It arrives quietly, settles in, and changes the temperature. Silence did that for me. I noticed how people reacted differently, how they watched me closer, how their tone shifted. They sensed something had changed. They just didn't know what, and that uncertainty worked in my favor. Silence became a threat without words, a warning without violence, a presence without explanation. I didn't have to intimidate, I just had to exist quietly. Because when someone no longer reacts the way you expect, you lose control over them. And control is what everyone wants. They tried to provoke me, to pull words out of me, to trigger the old version, but that version was gone. I watched their efforts fail, and in their failure, my confidence solidified. I was no longer defending myself. I was positioning myself. Silence allowed me to think clearly, to observe patterns, to recognize timing. I saw who spoke out of fear, who spoke out of ego, who spoke to dominate, and I saw how fragile their power really was. Noise collapses under pressure. Silence absorbs it. I learned patience, not passive patience, predatory patience. The kind that waits because it knows time is an ally. Every second I didn't react made them weaker. Every pause made them louder. Every unanswered moment pulled them off balance. They filled the silence with mistakes. They overplayed their hand, overexposed their motives, overestimated their control, and I recorded everything. Silently. This wasn't avoidance, this was strategy. I wasn't retreating, I was circling. Silence gave me space to rebuild myself without interference, without opinion, without noise polluting my focus. I no longer needed validation, I needed clarity, and clarity thrives in quiet. My thoughts sharpened, my emotions steady, my resolve hardened. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud. I was deliberate. Deliberation is deadly. They still mistook my silence for emptiness. Let them. A loaded weapon looks harmless until it is. I felt the shift fully when I stopped caring how I was perceived, when misunderstanding no longer bothered me, when assumptions became irrelevant, because perception is a cage if you live inside it. Silence unlocked that cage. I stopped explaining my moves before making them, stopped announcing my intentions, stopped seeking approval. I became unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. People fear what they can't map, what they can't read, what they can't manipulate. Silence erased my map. They didn't know where I stood anymore. And that uncertainty grew into respect or fear, sometimes both. I didn't need either. I needed advantage, and silence gave it to me. I understood then that silence is not the absence of action. It is the preparation for it. It is the moment before impact, the breath before the strike. Stillness before everything changes. I wasn't hiding my strength. I was concentrating it. Silence stopped being something I endured. It became something I wielded, a blade without sound, a storm without warning, a decision already made. They still talk, they always will. But now when I don't speak, it's not because I'm afraid to be heard. It's because I know exactly what silence does to them. It makes them restless. It makes them reckless. It makes them reveal themselves. And when the time comes, when I finally choose to speak, it won't be noise. It will be impact, because silence is not empty. It is loaded. And I decide when it fires, watching them reveal themselves. Something strange happens when you stop talking. People start talking for you. They fill the silence with their assumptions, their justifications, their confessions, and that's when the real education begins. I didn't have to interrogate anyone, didn't have to accuse, didn't have to push. I just listened while they talked too much. People always do. They talk when they're nervous. They talk when they're insecure. They talk when silence forces them to face themselves, and most can't handle that pressure, so they speak. They explain, they defend, they brag, they complain, they reveal, they talk. I watch, they slip, I remember. At first, they thought my silence meant I wasn't paying attention, that I was checked out, disconnected, unaware. That was their mistake. Silence sharpened my focus. When you're not preparing your next sentence, you hear everything. The hesitation before a lie, the change in tone when fear creeps in, the overconfidence that masks insecurity. I saw it all. They spoke freely around me, carelessly, because they thought I was harmless. They underestimated how much damage observation can do. Enemies expose themselves when they believe they're unchallenged, when they think they're in control, when they think no one is watching. They brag about their plans without realizing it. They hint at intentions they think are hidden. They joke about fears they pretend not to have. They tell you exactly who they are if you're quiet enough to hear it. They talk, I watch, they slip, I remember. I noticed who needed validation every few sentences, who couldn't tolerate not being the center, who spoke loudly to drown out doubt. I noticed who avoided certain topics, who deflected, who changed stories mid-sentence. Fear has patterns, so does guilt. And silence gives those patterns space to surface. They started to reveal their weaknesses without being asked. Who needed approval, who feared irrelevance, who was terrified of being exposed. They laughed too hard at their own jokes, over-explained simple things, filled every pause like silence was an enemy, because silence is an enemy to those with something to hide. I didn't challenge their stories, didn't correct inconsistencies, didn't call out contradictions. I let them pile up. Because people who lie will always trip over themselves eventually. Silence is patient. They mistook my lack of reaction for agreement, for ignorance, for weakness. So they lowered their guard. And when someone lowers their guard, they bleed information. I learned who feared losing control, who relied on intimidation instead of substance, who pretended to be strong but panicked when ignored. The more they talked, the clearer it became. Their power was noise-based. Mine was not. They needed reaction. I needed information. And information is the deadliest currency there is. They talked about their victories, but their tone betrayed insecurity. They talked about loyalty, but their eyes searched for reassurance. They talked about strength, but flinched at the idea of being alone. Words say one thing, behavior says another. Silence lets behavior speak. I watched alliances crack under casual conversation, saw egos collide, saw insecurities leak through confident masks. They exposed how fragile their control really was. They needed an audience. I didn't give them one. That absence unsettled them. They tried harder, spoke louder, said more, and every extra word was another mistake. They talk, I watch, they slip. I remember, I began to recognize patterns, who always spoke last, who interrupted, who avoided eye contact when certain names were mentioned. I learned who feared confrontation, who feared silence, who feared me noticing, because people sense observation. They may not know what you see, but they feel the weight of being watched. And that weight changes behavior. Some grew defensive, some grew arrogant, some grew reckless, all became predictable. That's when superiority crept in. Not arrogance, superiority of awareness. I wasn't smarter than them, I was quieter, and quiet people see further. I didn't rush to conclusions, didn't let emotion cloud judgment, didn't reveal what I knew. I let knowledge mature. Because information given too early loses its power. Silence isn't just psychological warfare. It's intelligence gathering, it's reconnaissance. It's letting your opponent explain their own strategy, and they always do. They tell you what they value, what they fear, what they can't afford to lose. They tell you how to hurt them without realizing it. All you have to do is shut up. That's what terrified them most, not my presence, my restraint. They couldn't read me anymore, couldn't predict reactions. Couldn't bait me, and without reaction their tactics collapse. Manipulation needs feedback, gaslighting needs response, intimidation needs fear, silence denies all three. So they escalated, talked more, exposed more, they accused, projected, deflected, each move more obvious than the last. I didn't stop them, I documented them, in memory, in pattern, in understanding. They revealed who would betray whom, who would fold under pressure, who would panic when the balance shifted. They didn't realize they were teaching me how to dismantle them. I learned who depended on chaos to feel important, who lost direction without control, who needed to dominate conversations to feel superior. Those people are fragile, and fragility is exploitable. I felt the emotional shift inside me, where once there was confusion, there was now clarity. Where once there was hurt, there was now calculation, not coldness, precision. I stopped seeing them as personal threats. They were systems, patterns, predictable behaviors, and predictable things are controllable. They talked about me too. Of course they did. People always talk about what unsettles them. They speculated, they assumed, they invented motives, and every assumption revealed their own thinking. Projection is confession. They told me exactly how they would act in my position, which told me everything I needed to know about them. They talk, I watch, they slip. I remember. Silence didn't make me invisible, it made me unreadable. And unreadable people are dangerous, because you can't prepare for what you don't understand. I didn't need to expose them publicly. Didn't need revenge speeches or dramatic confrontations. I just needed to know. Knowledge doesn't scream, it waits. And the more they talked, the more confident I became. Not in dominance, in inevitability, because people who expose themselves don't realize the moment they lose power. It happens quietly, while they're still talking. They think control comes from volume, from presence, from being heard. They never realize the real advantage belongs to the one who listens. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was studying offense. Their fears became my leverage. Their habits became my roadmap. Their words became my advantage. They handed it all over willingly, because they couldn't stand the silence, and I could. I can still hear them now, talking, explaining, justifying, still believing words protect them. They don't. Silence does, and I have mastered it. They talk. I watch, they slip, I remember. And when the moment comes, when silence finally breaks, it won't be with confusion, it won't be with emotion, it will be with certainty. Because while they were busy talking, I was learning exactly how to win. The loneliness of becoming dangerous, there is a moment no one warns you about. A moment where growth stops feeling powerful and starts feeling empty. Not because you're weak, but because you're changing, and change is isolating. The stronger I became, the quieter my world got. Not suddenly, not dramatically, slowly. People didn't leave all at once. They faded, conversations short, laughter thinned, eyes changed. They didn't say it out loud, but I felt it. I no longer belonged to the version of me they understood, and that scared them. Growth creates distance, not because you want it to, but because elevation changes perspective. You start seeing things differently, hearing things differently, tolerating less. What once felt normal now feels heavy. What once felt exciting now feels distracting. And what once felt like connection starts to feel like noise. That's the cost. No one tells you that becoming dangerous means becoming lonely, because dangerous people can't be controlled. And uncontrolled people make others uncomfortable, so they pull back. They say you've changed. They're right. You don't explain yourself. You don't defend it. You accept it. Because explaining growth to people committed to comfort is a losing battle. I felt the separation deepen. Fewer calls, fewer messages, fewer invitations. At first, it hurt. I wondered if I was doing something wrong, if I was becoming cold, if I was losing my humanity. But then I realized something. Distance wasn't punishment. It was proof. Proof that I was no longer accessible to weakness. See, when you stop reacting, people feel irrelevant. When you stop oversharing, people feel excluded. When you stop seeking approval, people feel threatened. So they label you distant, arrogant, cold, different. They don't realize this is the natural consequence of becoming self-contained. I stopped needing reassurance, stopped chasing validation, stopped explaining my silence. And in doing so, I walked alone, not because I wanted isolation, but because power doesn't travel in crowds. Lions walk alone before they rule. They don't seek approval from the herd. They don't announce their intentions. They don't ask permission to become dominant. They separate, they observe, they grow in silence. That's when I understood. Loneliness wasn't a flaw in the process, it was the process. Every step towards strength cuts another weak attachment. Every boundary burns another bridge built on convenience. Every moment of discipline pushes you further from people who thrive on chaos. And yes, it gets quiet. Painfully quiet. There are nights when the silence feels heavy. When old memories knock. When comfort tempts you to go back, to soften, to reconnect, to shrink just enough to fit again, but you don't. Because you remember why you left. You remember the exhaustion of being available, the drain of being understood only halfway. The betrayal of trusting people who couldn't carry weight, so you stay alone, and slowly something changes. The loneliness sharpens you. You start hearing your own thoughts clearly. Your instincts get louder. Your intuition gets precise. There's no one to distract you from yourself anymore. No one to blame, no one to lean on, no one to hide behind, just you. And that's terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because once you survive your own company, you become unbreakable. I stopped needing to be liked, stopped needing to be included, stopped needing to be seen. I became enough. Silence stopped being empty. It became selective, a filter. Anyone who couldn't respect it couldn't access me. Anyone who demanded constant presence couldn't keep up. Anyone who mistook silence for weakness was already behind. This wasn't loneliness anymore. This was separation. Separation from distraction, from dependency, from emotional noise. I wasn't alone because I was unwanted. I was alone because I was becoming rare. Dangerous growth doesn't attract crowds. It repels them because most people don't want transformation. They want familiarity. They want the version of you they could predict. Control, use. But once you step into your power, you're no longer convenient. You don't laugh on command. You don't explain your boundaries. You don't chase anyone who walks away. That unsettles people. So they distance themselves first to protect their ego. Let them. This solitude is sacred. It's where discipline is forged, where focus is sharpened, where emotional dependency dies. It's where you stop confusing company with connection. Because not all loneliness is bad. Some loneliness is necessary. Some loneliness is earned. Some loneliness is the price of becoming someone who cannot be manipulated. Silence now meant separation from weakness, from my own and from others. I no longer absorbed emotions that weren't mine, no longer carried conversations that drained me, no longer explained my ambition to people afraid of their own potential. I chose the quiet, and the quiet chose me back. This path isn't warm, it's not comforting, it doesn't applaud you. It strengthens you. And strength is often misunderstood as coldness by those who rely on warmth to survive. I accepted the solitude, not as a curse, but as initiation. This is what it feels like to outgrow rooms, to outpace conversations, to evolve beyond the need to be understood. I stopped expecting companionship on a warrior's path. Because warriors don't march with crowds. They train alone. They bleed alone. They rise alone. And when they return changed. I no longer fear being alone. I fear becoming weak enough to need noise again. So if you feel isolated right now, if the circle is shrinking, if the silence is loud, good. It means you're shedding skin. It means you're becoming dangerous. Lions walk alone before they rule. And so do you. Stay quiet, stay disciplined, stay alone if you must. Because what you're becoming cannot be built in crowds. And when the world finally notices your power, they won't remember the loneliness. They'll only remember that you rose without them. Pain becomes discipline. Pain didn't leave me. It stayed. It sat with me in the quiet, in the hours no one clapped for, in the nights where there was nothing to distract me from myself. Pain stopped screaming. It started instructing. At first, I thought pain was something to escape, something to numb, something to survive. I was wrong. Pain was a teacher, a brutal one, unforgiving, precise. Pain didn't ask how I felt. It asked what I was willing to do about it. So I stopped running. I stopped pretending I was okay. Stopped lying to myself about healing without effort. I sat with it, every regret, every humiliation, every moment I wished I could erase. I let them pile up, and then I did something different. I gave pain a job. I turned it into discipline. No speeches, no announcements, no promises to anyone else, just structure. Wake up, work, train, study, repeat. Not because I felt motivated, because I felt angry, because motivation lies, pain doesn't. Pain shows up every day, so I matched its consistency. Quiet nights became construction zones. No music loud enough to drown thoughts. No voices to soften the truth. just repetition. I trained, I failed, I trained again. I didn't romanticize it. Some nights were ugly, messy, exhausting. Some nights I wanted to quit, to feel comfort again, to be soft. But discipline doesn't care about comfort. Discipline cares about results. And pain was relentless fuel. While others slept, I rebuilt. Not loudly, not impressively, methodically. Pain taught me patience. It taught me restraint. It taught me how to suffer without collapsing. I learned how to wake up tired and still perform, how to carry emotional weight without showing it, how to keep my mouth shut and my standards high. No applause followed, no one noticed, and that was perfect, because applause weakens discipline. Witnesses turned progress into performance. I didn't want praise, I wanted power. Silence became my training ground. In silence, there's no validation, no feedback, no shortcuts, just you and the work never lies. I failed often, more than anyone saw. I failed privately, which meant I learned without ego. Every failure sharpened the process, tightened the routine, removed excuses. I trained, I failed, I trained again. Pain kept count. Pain remembered everything, every insult, every betrayal, every time I was underestimated. I didn't talk about it, I organized it. Pain became a schedule, a checklist, a standard. When I didn't feel like showing up, pain reminded me why I had to. When I wanted to rest too long, pain pulled me back. When comfort whispered, pain screamed. Silence fed obsession. Without noise, there was nothing to interrupt focus. No one to impress, no one to explain myself to. Just progress stacking quietly. People mistake obsession for madness. They don't see the control in it. They don't understand what happens when pain is no longer emotional. When pain becomes mechanical, I stopped asking, why did this happen to me? I started asking, how do I use it? That question changed everything. Pain stopped being a wound, it became a weapon. Every routine was deliberate, every habit sharpened. I didn't chase happiness, I built capability. Happiness is fragile, capability endures. While others searched for peace, I built tolerance. Tolerance for pressure, for isolation, for boredom. Discipline thrives where motivation dies. And pain ensured motivation never mattered again. I trained when it hurt. I trained when I was empty. I trained when nothing seemed to move. I trained because pain demanded progress. No applause, no witnesses, only results. Slow at first, almost invisible, but undeniable. Pain stripped weakness without mercy. It removed emotional indulgence, removed excuses, removed the need to be understood. I didn't need sympathy, I needed structure. And structure doesn't care how broken you feel. It asks one thing, did you show up? Most days the answer was barely, but barely was enough. Enough stacked into something dangerous. Pain doesn't want revenge, it wants evolution, and evolution is quiet. There's no dramatic soundtrack when discipline is born, just repetition, just sacrifice, just nights where you question everything and still continue. I trained, I failed, I trained again. That sentence became my identity. Not talented, not gifted, not special, consistent, relentless. Unseen, pain taught me to love the grind, not because it felt good, but because it was honest. No one clapped for discipline, they clapped for outcomes. That was fine. I wasn't building for applause, I was building for inevitability. Silence fueled obsession, and obsession built precision. Every movement intentional, every word measured, every reaction controlled. Pain removed impulsiveness. It taught me restraint. It taught me to wait, to watch, to plan, and to strike only when necessary. This wasn't healing, this was transformation. Healing seeks comfort. Transformation demands sacrifice. And pain was the toll. I paid it daily, without complaint, without witnesses. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It arrives fully formed. One day the pain quieted, not because it disappeared, but because it had done its job. It no longer needed to scream. It had shaped me, rewired me, disciplined me. Pain didn't break me, it organized me. So if you're hurting right now, if the nights are long, if the silence feels heavy, good. Use it. Turn pain into routine, routine into discipline, discipline into dominance. Train quietly, fail privately, build relentlessly. No applause, no witnesses, just results. And when the world finally looks at you and asks, "When did you become so strong?" you won't answer, because pain already did, and it trained you well. The moment they started to notice, something changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. It changed the way storms change direction, without warning, without explanation. They felt it before they understood it, because I stopped reacting. No more instant replies, no emotional outbursts, no visible wounds. I didn't argue, I didn't defend, I didn't chase closure. I disappeared from the places where I used to beg to be seen. And that's when they started to notice. Absence is not empty, absence is pressure. When you stop reacting, people start listening for footsteps that no longer come. They expected noise. They expected resistance, emotion, chaos. They expected me to break the silence. I didn't. I watched. And silence does something terrifying to insecure minds. It makes them imagine. Silence makes people imagine monsters. They replay conversations, reread old messages, search for hidden meaning in nothing. Because when you no longer explain yourself, they are forced to explain themselves. I didn't need to threat. My absence did it for me. They noticed I no longer flinched. No reaction to disrespect. No rush to correct lies. No hunger for approval. I was calm. And calm unnerves people who survive on control. They tested me. Subtle jabs, passive insults, provocations dressed as jokes. I didn't bite. That's when confusion set in, because they were used to pulling strings, used to reactions, used to emotional leverage. And suddenly there was nothing to grab. No anger to feed on, no sadness to exploit, no words to twist, just stillness, stillness that watched. They asked questions I didn't answer. They spoke louder, talked more, over-explained. People always do when silence stares back. I learned something powerful in that phase. Those who talk the most are usually the most afraid. They sensed the shift, not because I announced growth, but because I withdrew permission. Permission to access me, to test me, to misunderstand me loudly. I stopped correcting their narratives. Let them tell their version. Silence has patience, and patience makes people reckless. They started revealing themselves. Motives slip. Insecurities leak. Intentions surfaced. All because I wasn't interrupting anymore. I watched. I remembered. I didn't react. That restraint felt like dominance, not the loud kind, the inevitable kind. They noticed I no longer needed validation, no longer needed to be right, no longer needed to win arguments. I had already won something greater. Control. Control over my energy, my responses, my presence. I became unpredictable, not because I was chaotic, but because I was unreadable. They couldn't tell if I was angry, if I was planning, if I had moved on. That uncertainty haunted them because certainty is comfort, and silence denies comfort. I didn't disappear completely. I just became selective. I spoke when necessary, briefly, precisely. No extra emotion, no wasted words. Every sentence carried weight. Every pause carried threat. Not because I wanted to intimidate, but because intention sharpens everything. They leaned in when I spoke, because silence had trained them to. I wasn't chasing their attention anymore. They were searching for mine. That reversal was quiet, but irreversible. Absence rewrote the power dynamic. People who once dismissed me now wondered what I was thinking. People who once ignored me now watched my movements closely. I didn't smile more. I smiled less. I didn't explain growth. I embodied it. Silence turned me into a question mark, and people fear unanswered questions. They noticed I stopped competing, stopped proving, stopped participating in games rigged against me. I left the arena. And suddenly they felt exposed, because enemies need opposition, critics need reaction. Without it, they are left alone with themselves, and that's where discomfort lies. Silence does confront, it reflects, and reflection is brutal. I saw it in their eyes, the uncertainty, the recalculation, the subtle shift from arrogance to caution. They started choosing words carefully, watching tone, testing boundaries they once ignored, not because I demanded respect, but because silence demanded it for me. I wasn't louder, I was heavier, every step deliberate, every interaction minimal. I had learned the art of presence without permission. I didn't need to be invited, I didn't need to be acknowledged. My absence had already spoken. Silence trained them to imagine worst-case scenarios. Was I planning something? Had I outgrown them? Did I see through them? The truth didn't matter, the doubt did. Controlled menace isn't about threat, it's about restraint. It's about knowing you could react and choosing not to. That choice unnerves people more than aggression ever could, because aggression reveals intention, silence hides it, and hidden things grow. They noticed I no longer needed to be understood. That was the final shift. When you stop demanding understanding, you become untouchable. Misinterpretation loses its power. Criticism loses its grip. Because you're no longer trying to be seen. You're simply existing beyond reach. I wasn't invisible, I was unavailable, and that difference changes everything. Absence created space. Space created curiosity. Curiosity created fear. Fear created respect, all without a single confrontation. That was the moment they noticed, not when I spoke louder. But when I stopped speaking altogether, not when I demanded power, but when I stopped asking for permission. Silence didn't make me weak, it made me unavoidable. And once people notice that, they never see you the same again. Silence hurts them more than words ever could. Silence isn't mercy, it's consequence. People think punishment looks like anger, like shouting, like revenge dressed in noise. They're wrong. The loudest thing I ever did was stop speaking. Words give relief. Arguments give closure. Explanations give comfort. Silence gives none of that, and that's why it hurts. When you speak, you release pressure. When you explain, you hand them peace. When you forgive out loud, you let them sleep. I chose differently. No answers, no forgiveness, no explanation. Not because I couldn't speak. Because I understood something most never do. People don't fear hatred, they fear being erased. Silence denies them the thing they crave most. relevance. I didn't argue their lies, didn't correct their version, didn't fight for my name. I let it hang. Unresolved, heavy, permanent. They wanted reaction, they wanted emotion, tears, anger, anything to prove they mattered. I gave them nothing. And nothing is unbearable to the insecure. Silence becomes a mirror they can't escape. Every unanswered question turns inward. Every ignored message echoes louder than any insult. They replay moments. They search for signs. They wonder if you've moved on or if you're planning something worse. That uncertainty eats them alive. Words end conflict. Silence extends it indefinitely. No closure means no escape. They don't know if they were forgiven. They don't know if they were forgot. They don't know if they're still being judged. And not knowing is torture. I didn't block them out of anger. I removed access. Access is privilege, and they lost it. Silence strips power from those who live off reaction. Manipulators need engagement. Critics need defense. Enemies need resistance. Without it, they collapse under their own noise. They talk to fill the void, explain themselves unprompted, confess accidentally, reveal fear without realizing it. All because silence forces truth out. I watched it happen. They grew restless, then anxious, then desperate, because silence doesn't negotiate. It doesn't reassure. It doesn't clarify. It just exists. Unmovable. And immovable things terrify people who rely on control. I didn't need to punish them actively. Their minds did it for me. Every unanswered message became a question. Every question became doubt. Every doubt became regret. They wanted forgiveness. Forgiveness would have freed them. I refused, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Forgiveness is earned, closure is granted, and not everyone deserves access to either. No answers, no forgiveness, no explanation. Those words aren't anger. They're boundaries, boundaries that don't bend, don't soften, don't reopen wounds. Silence teaches people the weight of their actions. Without distraction, without debate, without negotiation, they sit alone with what they did, with what they said, with what they lost, and loss hits harder when no one explains it away. I didn't seek revenge. I chose finality. Words invite response. Silence ends the conversation permanently. They can't argue with absence. They can't manipulate quiet. They can't rewrite a story when the other side refuses to speak. That's dominance, not force, control. Psychological, precise, absolute. I didn't need the last word, because silence is the last word. People mistake kindness for weakness. They mistake patience for tolerance. Silence corrected that misunderstanding. They learned that access to me was not guaranteed, that my attention was not a right, that my energy was not infinite. Silence redefined my value, not as something to be taken, but something to be missed. They felt it when I stopped showing up, when I stopped reacting, when I stopped caring publicly. That absence hurt more than any confrontation ever could, because confrontation gives hope. Silence gives none, no chance to fix it, no chance to apologize properly. No chance to rewrite history, just the knowledge that they lost something permanent. And permanence scares people. I didn't need to announce my strength. I demonstrated it through restraint, through self-control, through the discipline to let silence do the work. No answers, no forgiveness, no explanation. That repetition isn't bitterness. It's resolution. I am not here to make others comfortable with my boundaries. I am here to protect my peace. And peace is ruthless when it has to be. Silence isn't passive, it's deliberate. It's the calm decision to no longer participate in your own disrespect. It's choosing dignity over drama, power over noise. Let them talk, let them wonder, let them regret. Because the loudest message I ever sent was the one I never explained. Silence didn't just hurt them, it ended them. And I didn't have to say a word. I am no longer accessible. There was a time when I was available to everyone. Every demand, every opinion, every insult disguised as honesty, I answered, I reacted, I explained. That version of me is gone, not dead, discarded, because access is power. And I gave mine away too cheaply. I was reachable at all hours, emotionally exposed, mentally open. I mistook openness for strength. I was wrong. Openness without boundaries is an invitation to be consumed. So I closed the gates, quietly. No announcement, no dramatic exit. I simply became unavailable, not distant. Unavailable. There's a difference. Distance can be crossed, unavailability cannot. I stopped responding to disrespect as if it deserved clarification. I stopped tolerating behavior just because it came from familiar faces. Familiarity does not equal permission. I learned that late, but I learned it permanently. Boundaries hardened, not out of bitterness, out of necessity. You don't build walls because you hate the world. You build them because you value what's inside. I no longer argue with people who benefit from misunderstanding me. I no longer lower my standards to keep weak connections alive. I no longer chase resolution with those who thrive on chaos. Emotional detachment became my strength, not numbness, control. I still feel deeply. I just don't give access to everyone who wants a reaction. Reactions are expensive now. Attention is expensive now. My presence is expensive now, and most people can't afford it. That realization didn't make me cruel. It made me precise. I stopped explaining my boundaries. Because people who respect you don't need explanations. And people who don't will only argue, so I stopped arguing. I enforce silently. Castles don't argue with peasants. They don't shout back. They don't defend their height. They simply stand. Unmovable, unreachable, protected. I don't need to prove my worth to those who only see value when they can extract it. I don't need to be liked by people who only feel powerful when others are small. I don't need approval from those who disappear when accountability arrives. I am no longer accessible to manipulation, to guilt, to emotional blackmail. I don't negotiate with disrespect. I remove myself from it. That calm you sense in me, it's not peace, it's certainty. Certainty about what I will not tolerate. Certainty about who gets access. Certainty about my value without external confirmation. I don't respond immediately anymore. Not because I'm busy, because I'm selective. I choose when to engage, when to speak, when to remain silent. That choice terrifies people who were used to my availability. They feel it as loss, as rejection, as arrogance. Let them. Their interpretation is not my responsibility. My responsibility is preservation of my mind, my energy, my direction. I don't over-explain my absence. I don't justify my silence. I don't soften my boundaries to appear kind. Kindness without self-respect is self-destruction. I choose respect first, always. People notice the change. They say I'm cold now, distant, different. They're right, cold to disrespect, distant from chaos, different from who I was when I allowed too much. This version of me doesn't chase connection, it evaluates it. Does this cost me peace? Does this drain my focus? Does this require me to shrink? If the answer is yes, access denied. No apology, no explanation. Calm arrogance entered my voice because insecurity left my system. I don't need to dominate conversations. I don't need to assert myself loudly. My boundaries do that for me. I don't compete. I don't convince. I don't beg to be understood. I simply exist out of reach. And that distance changes everything. People who once dismissed me now measure their words. People who once tested me now hesitate. Not because I threat, because I don't need them. Needlessness is power. When you no longer need validation, you become immune to manipulation. When you no longer seek approval, disrespect loses leverage. When you are no longer accessible, your presence becomes valuable. I don't announce my standards. I enforce them through absence. I don't warn people. I remove myself. That silence is the warning. I am not angry. I am done. Done being emotionally available to people who only show up to take. Done offering empathy to those who weaponize it. Done shrinking to make others comfortable. This is not revenge. This is self-respect. And self-respect looks like distance to those who benefited from your closeness. Castles don't argue with peasants. They don't explain their walls. They don't apologize for protection. They endure. They wait. They decide who enters. I am no longer accessible, not to disrespect, not to chaos, not to manipulation. Access is earned now, rare, intentional, and once revoked, it's permanent. I don't need to raise my voice. I don't need to threat. My absence speaks fluently. And it says one thing clearly: you no longer have access to me. The death of the old me, there is a moment that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No crowd, no ceremony, no applause, just a quiet decision that ends a lifetime. That was the moment the old me died, not slowly, not peacefully, deliberately. I stood face to face with everything I used to be. The one who explained too much. The one who waited for permission. The one who hoped people would be fair if I was patient enough. That version was tired, bleeding in places no one could see. I carried their expectations like chains, their opinions like verdicts, their approval like oxygen. And I was suffocating, so I did what had to be done. I let that version go. It wasn't easy. There was grief for the innocence, for the belief that effort alone was enough, for the idea that being good would protect me. I mourned that person, the one who tried to understand everyone, the one who absorbed damage silently, the one who thought kindness would be returned. That version of me is gone, and part of me wanted to save them. Part of me wanted to say, just hold on a little longer, maybe they'll change. They didn't, they never do. So rage arrived, not loud, focused. Rage at every boundary I failed to enforce. Every insult I swallowed. Every moment I betrayed myself to keep the peace. That rage wasn't chaos, it was clarity. It showed me the cost of staying the same. And then came relief, heavy, unmistakable, relief that I no longer had to pretend. Relief that I didn't have to carry everyone else's weight. Relief that I could finally choose myself without apology. Grief, rage, relief, all at once. That is what transformation feels like. Not rebirth yet, execution. I looked at the old me and saw weakness I once called empathy. I saw fear disguised as patience. I saw potential wasted on people who never deserved it. And I made a decision. That version of me is gone. Gone are the late night explanations. Gone are the second chances given too freely. Gone is the need to be liked by people who only respected strength. I didn't erase my past. I buried it properly, with intention. I thank the old me for surviving when survival was all we had. For enduring when there was no power yet. But survival is not the destination, it's the foundation, and foundations are not meant to be lived in. Silence marked the rebirth, not a loud declaration, not a dramatic exit, just a deep internal shift. The voice inside me changed tone. It stopped asking. It started deciding. That version of me is gone. The one who hesitated. The one who explained himself into exhaustion. The one who mistook tolerance for strength. Gone. What replaced it wasn't cruelty. It was resolve. A calm, immovable center that does not negotiate its worth. I didn't become heartless. I became selective. I didn't lose empathy. I stopped wasting it. I didn't abandon morality. I abandoned self-sacrifice for unworthy causes. This death was necessary. Because you cannot become powerful while clinging to a version of yourself that was built to survive oppression. You have to let that version die, completely. No resurrection, no nostalgia. No maybe someday. That version of me is gone. And the silence that followed was not emptiness, it was space. Space to rebuild without interference. Space to redefine standards. Space to decide who I am without outside input. People sensed it. They always do. They say, "You've changed." They're right, I had to. Staying the same was killing me slowly. This was faster, cleaner, final. I no longer move from fear. I no longer speak from wounds. I no longer act from the need to be accepted. That part died with the old me. What stands now is not louder. It's heavier, every word intentional. Every silence deliberate, every boundary enforced without emotion. That is what rebirth looks like when you've been burned enough times, not innocence renewed. Power refined. I don't romanticize the past. I honor it by never returning to it. That version of me is gone, and it will never come back, not when I'm tired, not when I'm lonely. Not when someone tests me with familiarity and history. History does not override growth. Nostalgia does not excuse disrespect. The old me is dead, and I grieved them properly so they wouldn't haunt me later. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't a mood. This was an execution carried out by necessity, and from that death came something irreversible. A self that does not flinch. A self that does not beg. A self that does not need to be understood to be effective. That is the emotional climax no one sees coming. Not anger, not revenge, detachment, clarity, finality. That version of me is gone, and the one standing now does not apologize for surviving and evolving at the same time. This is not rebirth with innocence. This is rebirth with memory, and memory makes you dangerous. The old me died so this version could exist, and I will not resurrect weakness out of guilt. The past served its purpose. Now it stays buried. That version of me is gone. And what replaced it is here to stay. They feel my absence everywhere. I didn't announce my departure. I didn't explain myself one last time. I didn't leave warnings or closure. I simply vanished. And that absence did more damage than my presence ever could. At first, they didn't notice. They never do. People only recognize value when it's no longer available. They assumed I'd return, that I'd reach out. that I'd soften. They were wrong. Because silence, when wielded correctly, is not emptiness. It's pressure. I stopped reacting, stopped correcting, stopped proving, and suddenly the noise shifted. Rooms felt different without my voice. Decisions felt heavier without my input. Victories felt hollow without someone to measure against. That's when it began, the unease. They looked for me in places I used to stand, and I wasn't there. They checked messages. Nothing. They waited for my response. Silence. They expected resistance. I gave them nothing, and nothing became unbearable. My absence became a mirror. In it they saw their arrogance, their underestimation, their careless dismissals. They saw the moment they thought they'd won, and realized they'd only removed the shield protecting them from consequence. I didn't leave to punish them. I left to grow beyond them, but growth casts shadows, and those shadows reach far. My silence echoes louder than their apologies, because apologies come too late when the door is already closed. They replay conversations now, every interruption, every insult masked as honesty, every time they assumed I'd always be there. They thought I was constant. They mistook consistency for weakness. They confused patience with permission. Now they feel it in missed opportunities, in unstable ground, in the absence of someone who carried more than they realized. I didn't take revenge. I took my energy back, and when I did, everything collapsed quietly. They started saying my name differently, not with confidence, with hesitation, with regret. With that subtle tone people use when they realize they misjudged someone who no longer needs them. I hear it from a distance. I feel it in the way they pause before speaking about me. They don't criticize anymore, they reminisce. That's how you know it's too late. I became the standard only after I left. My absence taught them what my presence protected them from. I was the calm in their chaos, the balance in their instability, the restraint that kept things civil. Without me, their masks slipped. Without me, they turned on each other. That's the cost of underestimating someone who moves in silence. They thought silence meant defeat. But silence was strategy. I didn't disappear to hide. I disappeared to reposition. While they were talking, I was becoming. While they were assuming, I was ascending. While they were waiting for my reaction, I was designing my future without them in it. My silence echoes louder than their apologies. Because now, every apology is a confession, an admission that they felt the loss. That they notice the void, that they finally understand what they failed to value. But understanding does not reopen access. Regret does not rebuild bridges I burned intentionally. I don't need to remind them what I was worth. They feel it every time they reach for something that no longer exists. Every time they face a challenge I would have handled. Every time they wish I were still there to absorb the impact, but I'm not, and I won't be, because absence, when permanent, rewrites power. I am no longer part of their story. I am the missing chapter they can't stop thinking about. They feel me in silence, in hesitation, in instability. In every moment they realize they're on their own. That's not cruelty, that's consequence. I didn't disappear to be remembered. I disappeared to become unreachable. And now my absence is a presence they cannot escape. It lingers in conversations where my name is followed by a pause, in plans that fall apart without my influence. In confidence that cracks without my reinforcement. They underestimated me once. They won't make that mistake again, not because I warned them, but because silence taught them. My silence echoes louder than their apologies, and I let it. I let them sit with it, feel it, learn from it, because some lessons require loss, and some power is only revealed when you leave. I am no longer there to soften the blow, no longer there to translate my worth, no longer there to make things easier for people who made things harder for me. They feel my absence everywhere, in their regret, in their reflection, in their realization, and I feel nothing but forward motion. This is vindication without mercy, not because I hate them, but because I outgrew them. Silence was the weapon, and it worked. Let them wonder I learned something they never expected me to learn. Explanations are gifts, closure is mercy, and answers are privileges, so I took them all away. I stopped explaining myself, stopped justifying my decisions, stopped clarifying intentions to people who never listened when I spoke clearly. I realized something powerful. Confusion hurts longer than truth, because truth ends arguments. Truth closes chapters, but unanswered questions, they rot inside the mind, they echo, they multiply, they never sleep. So I chose silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had nothing left to prove. I left them with fragments, with half memories, with moments they can't finish replaying. Did I plan it? Did I move on? Did I forgive? Did I win? They don't know, and not knowing is the punishment. Let them wonder. Let them replay my last words, searching for hidden meanings. Let them analyze my absence like a crime scene with no body. Let them ask each other questions I will never answer. That's power. I used to think strength meant confrontation, raising my voice, standing my ground, explaining myself until I was exhausted. That wasn't strength. That was accessibility. And accessibility is dangerous when given to the wrong people. Now I give them nothing, no clarification, no reaction, no reassurance, just distance. And distance forces reflection. They wonder if I ever cared. They wonder if it was all an act. They wonder if they pushed too far. They wonder if they were the reason. And that question hurts the most. Let them wonder. Let them wait for a message that never comes. Let them check their phones with that quiet hope they pretend not to have. Let them sit with the silence they created, because silence is honest. Silence doesn't argue, doesn't defend, doesn't negotiate. Silence just exists, and its existence is unbearable to people who rely on control. They want explanations because explanations give them power. They want closure because closure absolves guilt. They want forgiveness because forgiveness cleans their conscience. I give them none of it. No answers, no forgiveness, no explanation, not out of spite, out of self-respect. I am no longer the translator of my own worth. If they didn't understand me when I was present, they don't deserve to understand me now that I'm gone. Let them wonder why I stopped trying. Let them wonder why I didn't fight harder. Let them wonder why I walked away so calmly after everything. They'll build stories. Some will paint me as cold. Some will call me cruel. Some will convince themselves they were right all along. That's fine. Let them create whatever version helps them sleep, because the truth would keep them awake. The truth is simple. I chose myself, and that choice removed them from the equation. Silence is not passive. It's deliberate. It's the long game. Every unanswered question becomes a weight. Every ignored message becomes a reminder. Every attempt to reach me that fails tightens the grip of regret. They wanted a reaction, they got distance. They wanted clarity, they got mystery. They wanted access, they got a wall. Let them wonder what changed. Let them wonder when it happened. Let them wonder why they didn't see it coming. They underestimated my ability to walk away without destroying everything. But walking away quietly is more devastating than burning bridges loudly. Fire is quick. Silence is endless. I don't need to haunt them. My absence does that for me. In quiet moments, they'll remember something they said. Something careless, something sharp. They'll wonder if that was the moment everything shifted. They'll revisit old conversations, searching for warning signs. They won't find any, because I didn't threat, I didn't warn, I just left. Let them wonder, let them wait, let them break under the weight of their own assumptions, break under the realization that not everyone needs revenge to move on. Some people just need distance. Some people just need silence. Some people become untouchable the moment they stop explaining themselves. I am no longer accessible to misunderstanding. I am no longer available for closure. I am no longer interested in being understood by those who never tried. They'll ask why. They'll never hear the answer. And that unanswered why will follow them. In quiet rooms, late nights, moments of reflection they can't escape. Let them wonder if I'm happier. Let them wonder if I'm stronger. Let them wonder if I even think about them anymore. I won't confirm or deny, because ambiguity is dominance. I don't owe anyone the comfort of certainty. I don't owe anyone a final conversation. I don't owe anyone peace of mind at the expense of my own. Silence was my decision, and I stand by it. Let them wonder until the wondering becomes acceptance. Let them wait until waiting turns into regret. Let them break under the understanding that some doors close forever. Not with noise, not with drama, but with finality. This is not cruelty. This is control. This is what happens when you stop performing and start protecting, when you stop explaining and start ascending. Let them wonder, because I already know who I am, and that is enough. I no longer need revenge. My growth is enough. There was a time when revenge lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. Every breath carried their names. Every ambition was fueled by spite. Every sleepless night was rehearsing a future where they would finally see what they did to me. I wanted them to regret it. I wanted their realization to be loud, public, unavoidable. I wanted justice to hurt. That version of me needed revenge to survive, because pain was still in control. But listen to me now. Something changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. Revenge stopped motivating me the moment I outgrew the wound. I realized something dangerous. When you keep chasing revenge, you're still orbiting the people who tried to destroy you. They remain the center. Your anger keeps them alive. Your rage gives them relevance. And I refuse to let them matter any longer. Revenge is loud. Growth is silent. Revenge demands witnesses. Growth doesn't care who's watching. Revenge says, look at what I became because of you. Growth says, look at what I became despite you. That difference changed everything. I stopped fantasizing about their downfall. I stopped imagining their apologies. I stopped needing them to understand, because understanding them was no longer required for my peace. I didn't forgive them, I surpassed them, and that is far more final. Revenge keeps you emotionally chained to the past. Growth cuts the chain and walks forward without turning back. I don't need to hurt them to feel powerful. I don't need them to lose for me to win. I don't need their pain to validate my progress. My life speaks now, and it speaks fluently. Success without acknowledgement is the sharpest blade. They don't know how far I've gone. They don't know what I've built. They don't know who I've become, and I don't rush to update them. That's silence. That's confidence. I used to want them to notice the change. Now I prefer that they don't, because nothing unsettles people more than realizing too late that you've moved beyond their reach. They'll hear about me secondhand, through whispers, through rumors, through comparisons they didn't ask for. And they'll wonder when it happened, while I'm already gone. Revenge would have kept me angry. Growth made me precise. Anger is noisy, it leaks. Precision is controlled. It doesn't waste energy. I no longer react. I respond only when necessary. I no longer prove. I produce. I no longer explain. I execute. That's evolution. Look at yourself. Look at what you've survived. Look at how much weight you carried without collapsing. Do you really want to give that strength away to revenge? Do you really want your greatest achievement to be someone else's regret? No, your growth deserves better. I don't rise to make them feel small. I rise because this is where I belong. Quiet superiority replaced rage, not arrogance, certainty. I know what I'm capable of now. I know my value without needing applause. I know my direction without asking for permission. That calm you hear in my voice, it's not weakness, it's dominance under control. I don't need revenge because revenge implies I was wronged and stuck there. I was wronged, but I moved on, and moving on is the ultimate victory. They expected bitterness. They expected collapse. They expected me to stay the same broken version they walked away from. Instead, I evolved, without announcing it, without warning, without needing their reaction. That's what hurts the most, not my anger, my indifference. Indifference means they lost access, lost influence, lost importance. I no longer carry the weight of what they did. I carry the momentum of what I built. Revenge would have been temporary. This is permanent. I don't need them to regret me. I need me to respect me. And I do every disciplined morning, every quiet sacrifice, every decision made without emotional noise. That's my revenge if you want to call it that. But I don't. I call it evolution. I call it freedom. I call it power that doesn't need to shout. Let them stay where they are. Let them believe whatever story helps them cope. I'm not correcting narratives anymore. I'm writing outcomes, and outcomes don't argue. They exist. I no longer need revenge, because my growth did what revenge never could. It healed me. It elevated me. It detached me. And in that detachment, I became untouchable. This is the level where anger can't reach. This is the height where old pain can't breathe. This is the version of me that doesn't look back, not because I'm afraid, but because there's nothing worth returning to. My growth is enough, more than enough, and that is the final word. The fear they can't name, they feel it now, not as a thought, not as a sentence they can explain, but as a tightening in the chest. A hesitation before speaking your name, a pause where confidence used to live. They don't know why, and that's what terrifies them, because fear with a face can be confronted. Fear with a name can be discussed. Fear with a reason can be justified, but this has no label. Just exists. Heavy, lingering, unavoidable. They sense danger, but they can't point to a single action. They can't accuse you. They can't blame you. You haven't done anything. And that's the problem. You stopped reacting, stopped explaining, stopped giving them emotional signals to track. You became unreadable, and people fear what they cannot predict. Once they understood you, they knew what buttons to press. They knew what words would cut. They knew how to pull a reaction out of you. You were familiar terrain. Safe, now you are silence with intent. You are calm without weakness. You are control without apology. And it unsettles them because storms don't announce themselves. They don't send warnings to those who ignored the clouds. They don't ask permission. They arrive when the air has already changed. That's you now. The air changes when you enter. Conversations soften. Laughter adjusts its volume. Confidence becomes cautious, not because you threat, but because you no longer reassure. You don't smile to make them comfortable. You don't speak to fill space. You don't react to make things predictable. You observe, and observation is power. They look at you and feel exposed. Because when you say nothing, they say everything. Their insecurity leaks, their arrogance cracks, their masks slip. And you remember, you always remember, that's where the fear begins, not in what you do. In what you might do, you've become unpredictable, not chaotic, controlled. There's a difference. Chaos is loud. Predictable in its mess. Control is quiet. Impossible to read. They can't tell if you're forgiving or calculating. They can't tell if you've moved on or moved ahead. They can't tell if you see them as a threat or as irrelevant. And uncertainty is torture. Once you explained yourself, you justified your decisions, you softened your edges, you made yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. That version is gone. Now you don't announce your intentions, you don't correct assumptions, you let them guess. And guessing wears people down. They replay past conversations, they analyze your silence, they search for meaning in your absence, while you're steady, centered, unbothered. That contrast is what frightens them most, because you're not angry, you're not emotional, you're not reactive, you're calm. And calm people with a past are dangerous. They know you've been tested. They know you've been broken. They know you've disappeared and returned different. But they don't know what you learned in that silence. They don't know what rules you rewrote. They don't know how far you're willing to go. And they're afraid to ask. Storms don't announce themselves. They don't explain their pressure. They don't warn before they shift direction. They just arrive. And people only realize the danger when it's already too late to prepare. That's what you've become. Not a threat that shouts. A presence that alters behavior. You don't need to intimidate. Your composure does it for you. You don't need to dominate. Your restraint does it for you. They sense that you are no longer bound by the rules that once controlled you. You don't seek approval. You don't chase validation. You don't flinch under judgment. And when someone has nothing to lose emotionally, they become impossible to manipulate. That's the fear they can't name. You don't react the way you used to. Insults don't land. Provocations fall flat. Attempts to control go unanswered. And unanswered actions create paranoia. They wonder if you're planning something. They wonder if you've already decided. They wonder if they misjudged you. They wonder if the silence means forgiveness or finality. Let them wonder, because while they're guessing, you're grounded. While they're anxious, you're clear. While they're nervous, you're prepared, not for revenge, for inevitability. You don't rush, you don't explain, you don't reassure. You move when the moment is right. And that patience, that's lethal. They try to provoke you just to see a reaction. just to confirm you're still human. But you don't give it to them, and the lack of confirmation drives them deeper into unease. Because if they can't predict you, they can't control outcomes. And control is what they crave. You've taken that away without lifting a finger. Look at yourself. Look at the calm you've earned. Look at the discipline that holds you steady. Look at the restraint that keeps your power contained. Do you feel it? That weight? That's presence. That's what happens when someone survives chaos and chooses silence over noise. You're no longer dangerous because of what you might do. You're dangerous because you don't need to do anything at all. Your existence alone forces people to confront themselves, and most people don't like what they see when there's no distraction. Storms don't announce themselves, they change the pressure. They darken the horizon. They make people uneasy long before the first drop falls. You are that shift, that unspoken warning, that quiet signal that something has changed. They can't explain it. They can't articulate it. They just know to be careful. And that knowledge is power. You didn't demand respect. You became someone whose silence commands it. You didn't chase fear. You outgrew fear. And now fear follows you without knowing why. Stay calm. Stay unreadable. Stay grounded in this version of yourself. Because the most terrifying thing in the world is not rage. It's restraint. And you have mastered it. I chose silence, and it made me untouchable. I didn't stumble into silence. I chose it after the noise failed me, after words betrayed me, after explanations were used against me. I chose silence the way a blade chooses stillness before the strike, and in that stillness I changed. Once I spoke too much. I defended myself to people who never intended to understand. I bled my truth into rooms that fed on it. I mistook being heard for being respected. That mistake cost me years. Then one day I stopped. No announcement, no farewell speech, just restraint. And the moment I stopped explaining, the world shifted. Silence taught me what noise never could. It taught me patience. It taught me precision. It taught me that power does not argue. When you are silent, you hear everything. The lies people tell themselves, the fear hidden behind confidence, the hunger behind cruelty. I listened, I learned, I surpassed. Silence stripped away illusions. I saw who needed me weak. I saw who benefited from my doubt. I saw who mistook kindness for permission. And I stopped feeding them. I didn't get louder. I got sharper. Silence became my discipline. Every moment I didn't react was a moment I reclaimed. Every insult unanswered was a victory. Every urge to explain resisted was strength earned. People think silence is absence. They're wrong. Silence is presence under control. It is emotion mastered, impulse denied, power contained. I learned that when you say nothing, people project everything. Their guilt, their paranoia, their insecurity. They speak for you, they expose themselves, and you stay clean. Silence made me untouchable because it removed leverage. You can't manipulate what you can't read. You can't provoke what won't respond. You can't control someone who has already let go of needing your approval. I stopped needing closure. I stopped needing apologies. I stopped needing to win arguments. I started winning time. Time to refine, time to build, time to become. While they talked, I trained. While they speculated, I structured. While they doubted, I disciplined my mind until it obeyed me without hesitation. Silence was not weakness. It was selection. I chose what deserved my energy, and most things didn't. I learned that the loudest people are usually the most afraid of being seen, afraid of being irrelevant, afraid of silence exposing what they refuse to face. I am not afraid of silence. I live there. That's where I forged this version of myself. The one who doesn't rush, the one who doesn't react, the one who doesn't flinch when tested. I listened. I learned, I surpassed, not them, my former self, the one who needed validation, the one who explained pain to those who enjoyed causing it. That version is gone. Silence buried it. And what rose was something colder, calmer, cleaner. I don't seek dominance. I embody it. I don't chase respect. My boundaries enforce it. I don't threat. My restraint does more damage than rage ever could. When you choose silence, you choose clarity. You stop drowning in reaction and start seeing patterns. You recognize cycles. You recognize who only shows up when you're vulnerable. You recognize who disappears when you stop entertaining nonsense. And you let them go without a word. That's power. Because true power does not explain its exit, it leaves an echo. Silence taught me that I don't need to prove anything. Results speak when words are exhausted. Presence speaks when noise fades. Control speaks when chaos begs for attention. I am no longer accessible to disrespect, no longer available for emotional manipulation. No longer interested in being understood by those committed to misunderstanding me. I chose silence and it refined my standards. It made my circle smaller and my focus sharper. It removed distractions that once disguised themselves as obligations. I stopped answering to everyone. I started answering to purpose. I listened. I learned. I surpassed. Now when I speak, it matters. Because I don't speak often. When I move, it's intentional because I don't move impulsively. When I decide, it's final because silence taught me to think before committing. People feel it. They feel the shift. Not because I announce it, but because they can't access me the way they used to. They can't read me. They can't bait me. They can't pull reactions out of thin air, and that frustrates them. Good. Frustration is the sound of lost control. Silence took their power and gave it back to me. I didn't become untouchable by hardening my heart. I became untouchable by mastering my mind. I no longer leak emotion into hostile spaces. I no longer volunteer explanations to people who twist them. I no longer confuse vulnerability with exposure. Silence taught me discretion. It taught me timing. It taught me that not every battle deserves my presence. Some battles are won by absence, and the ones that matter, they're already decided before words are spoken. Look at yourself. Look at how far you've come without applause. Look at what you built in quiet rooms. Look at how many times you chose restraint over reaction. Do you see weakness? Or do you see mastery? Silence didn't make me invisible. It made me undeniable. It didn't erase me. It sharpened me. It didn't isolate me. It elevated me. I listened. I learned. I surpassed. And now I speak only to declare this. I don't need noise to be powerful. I don't need chaos to feel alive. I don't need revenge to feel complete. My growth is my answer. My control is my proof. My silence is my signature. I chose silence, and it made me untouchable. You will regret how you treated me. I'm not here to threaten you. Threats are loud, desperate. They beg for attention. I don't beg anymore. This isn't rage speaking. This is certainty. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. The kind that doesn't raise its voice. You will regret how you treated me. not because I'll remind you, not because I'll chase justice, not because I'll return what you gave me. You will regret it because time will do what I never had to. Regret doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives quietly, just like I did. You didn't notice me then. You won't notice regret either until it's sitting beside you, uninvited, unavoidable. I remember who I was when you dismissed me. I remember the look in your eyes when you thought you had power. I remember how easy it was for you to underestimate silence because it didn't flatter your ego. You mistook my restraint for fear. You mistook my patience for weakness. You mistook my silence for surrender. That was your error. I never forgot it. But I didn't carry it like a weapon. I carried it like a lesson. I watched how casually you spoke over me, how easily you ignored what I warned you about, how confidently you believed I would always be there to absorb the impact. You were wrong. I didn't explode. I didn't retaliate. I didn't argue my worth. I stepped back. And while you continued exactly as you were, I changed. That's the part you didn't see. You thought nothing happened because nothing loud happened. But some transformations don't make noise, they make distance. You didn't hear me leave because I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly and locked it from the inside. You won't regret what you did today or tomorrow. Regret isn't punctual, it waits. It waits until the moment you need something and realize I'm no longer there. It waits until you see me calm in situations that used to break me. It waits until my absence becomes a pattern you can't ignore. And then it speaks. Not loudly, not cruelly, just clearly. You'll remember the chances you had to be decent. You'll remember the moments you chose comfort over respect. You'll remember the way you treated someone who never raised their voice but never forgot either. I won't remind you. You'll do it yourself. That's how regret works. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about your excuses. It shows up when your pride finally runs out of explanations. I don't need revenge because regret is more patient than anger. Anger burns fast. Regret rots slow. You laughed when you thought I was beneath you. You spoke freely because you believed I had no leverage. You relaxed because you thought I would always be accessible. And now you feel something you can't name. Not fear, not guilt. Something quieter, something heavier. That's the beginning. Regret doesn't look like pain at first. It looks like confusion. Like, why did they change? Like, why won't they answer? Like, why does their silence feel personal? It feels personal because it is. Not because I designed it that way, but because your conscience recognizes what your ego refused to. You will replay moments you once dismissed. Small comments, small actions, small cruelties you called jokes or honesty or just the way you are. Those moments don't disappear, they age, and one day they mature into understanding. By then it's too late. I won't be standing there waiting for acknowledgement. I won't be available for closure. I won't even be angry. I'll be gone, not missing, not lost, just unreachable. And that's what will haunt you, not my words, not my success, my indifference. You'll wonder when it changed, when the dynamic shifted, when the power moved without an announcement. And you'll realize it happened the moment I stopped explaining myself. Regret arrives quietly, just like I did. I don't need to prove anything to you now. Your regret will be proof enough. Proof that you misjudged silence. Proof that you underestimated patience. Proof that you mistook kindness for permanence. I was never permanent. I was conditional, and you violated the conditions. You'll regret how you spoke when you thought I couldn't walk away. You'll regret how you treated someone who was still becoming. You'll regret not seeing the warning signs because they didn't come with threats. They came with restraint. I don't celebrate that future. I don't fantasize about it. I don't even think about you often anymore. That's the most dangerous part. Regret grows best in the absence of attention. I won't be there to soften the realization. I won't be there to make it easier. I won't be there to explain why access was revoked. No answers, no forgiveness, no explanation, just distance and clarity. You'll feel it when you see me unbothered by things that still consume you. You'll feel it when you notice I don't look back. You'll feel it when you understand that I didn't lose anything by leaving. I gained myself. I didn't win by destroying you. I won by outgrowing the version of me that tolerated you. That's not arrogance, that's evolution. And evolution doesn't announce itself to those it leaves behind. You will regret how you treated me. Not because I demand it, not because I enforce it, but because one day you'll finally see me clearly. And by then I won't be close enough to hear your apology. Regret arrives quietly, just like I did. And when it sits with you, when it asks you questions you can't answer honestly, remember this: I warned you without raising my voice. I left without making a scene. I grew without asking permission, and now I move forward without looking back. You will regret how you treated me, and I will never need to say another word. I am the calm before everything changes. I am not chaos. Chaos is loud, messy. It announces itself too early. That has never been my way. I am the calm, the kind that unnerves people because it doesn't explain itself. The kind that makes rooms go quiet without asking for attention. You think nothing is happening because nothing is breaking yet. That's your mistake. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is restraint. And restraint is power under control. I've learned that the hard way. There was a time I reacted to everything, every insult, every betrayal, every moment I was underestimated. I burned fast back then, bright, predictable. They saw me coming, so they prepared, so I adapted. Now I don't rush, I don't explain, I don't warn, I wait. Because the most dangerous moments are always quiet. The world thinks change looks dramatic, explosive, obvious. They're wrong. Real change arrives softly. It studies the room. It learns the weaknesses. It understands the rhythm. And then it moves. That's what I am now. Not the storm, the pressure before the storm. I don't need to threaten you because inevitability doesn't shout. It doesn't negotiate. It simply arrives when resistance no longer matters. Look at me. Do you see aggression, or do you see composure that has survived too much to be shaken? This calm didn't come from comfort. It came from watching people show their true nature when they thought I had nothing left. It came from being tested when no one was watching. It came from standing alone and realizing I didn't need approval to continue. I stopped needing noise to feel powerful. I stopped needing validation to feel real. I stopped needing permission to evolve. That's when everything changed. Because the moment you stop reacting, you start controlling. People fear anger. They should fear patience. Anger burns energy. Patience stores it. Anger speaks. Patience listens. Anger exposes intentions. Patience hides them. And when patience finally acts, it acts decisively. That's where I stand now. Calm, focused, unmoved, not because I lack emotion, but because I mastered it. Every scar taught me restraint. Every loss taught me timing. Every betrayal taught me precision. I didn't harden, I sharpened. You're waiting for me to explode, to snap, to reveal something, but I won't. Because the moment before impact is always silent. That silence you feel, that tension in the air, that's not hesitation. That's alignment. I am aligned with who I've become. I don't argue with people who don't understand depth. I don't chase those who only recognize value when it's loud. I don't compete where the rules are built for distractions. I operate elsewhere now, internally. That's why you can't read me. That's why my calm makes you uncomfortable. You're used to enemies who reveal themselves. I don't. I let time do the revealing. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them underestimate. I am not offended. I am observing, because when everything changes, it won't feel sudden to me. It will feel overdue. I've already made peace with becoming the villain in someone else's story. Peace with being misunderstood. Peace with being ahead of what people are ready to accept. History never thanks the calm ones early. It thanks them after everything has shifted. I don't need to dominate conversations to dominate outcomes. I don't need to raise my voice to raise the stakes. I don't need approval to move forward. I move regardless. This calm is not mercy. It's preparation, not for destruction, for inevitability. Because once you've seen the patterns, once you understand how fragile systems really are, you stop wasting energy on emotion. You act when it matters, and until then you remain still. I am still, but I am not stagnant. Every second of calm is a second of momentum stored. Every breath I take is measured. Every decision intentional. That's why when things change, they will change completely. No half measures, no reversals, no apologies. I won't explain myself afterward. I won't justify my evolution. I won't soften my edges to make others comfortable. I didn't come this far to become acceptable. I came this far to become inevitable. This calm you see is the last warning you'll never hear. Not because I want you afraid, but because fear would imply choice. There is no choice anymore, only timing. And timing is on my side. I've already let go of who I used to be. That version needed recognition. This version needs nothing. That's the difference. That's the shift. That's the moment everything turns. I am the calm before everything changes. And when the world finally notices the impact, I will already be moving forward. Unshaken, unapologetic, unstoppable. Silence is my final answer. There was a time I thought my voice was my weapon. I thought if I explained myself clearly enough, fought hard enough, proved my pain loudly enough, someone would finally understand. That was before I learned the truth. The world doesn't listen to words. It listens to outcomes. It listens to presence, to posture, to who remains standing when the noise dies. So I stopped talking, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had learned everything I needed to know. Silence didn't weaken me. It refined me. When I stopped explaining, I stopped bleeding in public. When I stopped defending, I stopped giving my enemies a script. When I stopped reacting, I started deciding. Silence became my final answer to every insult, every doubt, every attempt to provoke a response. They mistook it for retreat. They mistook it for fear. They were wrong. Silence was not absence. It was discipline. I listened while they revealed themselves. I listened while they grew comfortable. I listened while they underestimated what restraint was building inside me. Every word they spoke gave me clarity. Every judgment sharpened my focus. Every attempt to define me taught me exactly what I was becoming. I didn't interrupt. I observed, because loud people always expose their limits. Quiet people expand theirs. I stopped announcing my intentions. I stopped seeking agreement. I stopped needing applause to move forward. That's when I changed permanently, not into something cruel, into something controlled. I no longer chase revenge. Revenge is loud. Revenge wants witnesses. I chose something colder. Evolution. Growth that doesn't look back. Progress that doesn't explain. Results that don't argue. Let them keep their opinions. Let them rewrite the past in whatever way helps them sleep. I don't need validation from people who couldn't survive my silence. I don't need closure from those who never offered truth. I found something stronger. Finality. The kind that doesn't slam doors. It simply locks them and throws away the key. I don't threaten anymore. Threats are for those still negotiating. I don't warn anymore. Warnings are wasted on the unprepared. I let reality handle the conversation because reality is honest. It doesn't debate. It doesn't care how you feel. It just arrives. And when it does, it leaves no room for excuses. That's what I became, not a voice. A presence, not an argument, an outcome. You won't hear me coming. You won't see me explain myself. You'll only notice the shift when the balance has already changed. That's intentional. Because the strongest move is the one you don't announce. The strongest answer is the one that doesn't require words. Silence taught me patience. Patience taught me timing. Timing taught me inevitability. I don't rush moments anymore. I let them ripen. I let people believe they're safe. I let systems assume they're stable. Then I move when resistance no longer matters. This isn't rage. This is clarity. This isn't bitterness. This is resolution. I didn't lose my voice. I outgrew the need to use it. Every scar you see was paid for with lessons. Every lesson was absorbed. Nothing was wasted. Pain became precision. Betrayal became awareness. Loneliness became independence. I don't carry anger forward. Anger is heavy. I carry understanding. Understanding is lethal. I understand how power really works now. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't justify itself. It simply exists until everything else adjusts around it. That's why I'm done explaining. Done convincing. Done proving. The era of words is over. This is the era of results. No speeches, no arguments, no emotional appeals, just outcomes that speak on my behalf. If you're looking for closure, look at how far I've gone without you. If you're looking for revenge, look at how irrelevant you've become. If you're looking for my answer, listen closely. There is none, because silence is my final answer. No words, no warnings, just results. I don't need to be understood. I need to be unstoppable. And I am. They spoke, I listened. Now I rise.